Hello, Gamecock fans. I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. Welcome to Ball Don't Lie, SGTV's premier live sports show.
JP and I will be giving you our weekly insight every Friday.
This week on the show, we're talking South Carolina baseball and basketball.
And later, more hoops coverage from across the country.
Be sure to stick around for this week's edition of Head to Head Pick'ems.
And without further ado, welcome to Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome to the Kennedy Greenhouse Studio.
I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry.
This is the one where there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer.
I'm always the get-back game guy.
There's so many teams with so many good wins.
Because, they love seeing Clemson lose no matter what.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that love seeing Clemson lose.
Yeah,
Return of the King released 20 years ago today. There you go. And for that reason, give me the Noles.
I like being right more than I like being happy.
I think the committee made the right choice.
Florida State did not lose a football game. It's football. This is college football.
How can you not be romantic about baseball? It's just such a tremendous sport.
It's
But
time.
man,
Is it time?
I think it's time.
This is Ball Don't Lie.
Gamecock baseball has continued its hot start, relying on consistent hitting across the lineup of one that has been really looked at as one of the best in all of college baseball. And it was a big part of why the Gamecocks found themselves in the top 25. The early returns have been very good for this lineup, Spencer.
It sure has. Of course, they're returning a lot of players from last year's team. Cole Messina, Ethan Petrie, Gavin Casas, Dylan Brewers, just some notable names there. But a lot of guys that they've brought in via the transfer portal or freshmen are making a huge impact as well. Tyler Causey has been a really hot bat, and some other guys it's a little bit of a committee, I'd say. They do a good job of using a lot of players, but, they're plus 60 in run differential so far to start the season, and that's as good as you can ask for this team.
Absolutely. The thunder we're hearing outside is just the thunder of the Gamecock bats getting ready for this weekend. And, man, it's been a great start so far. Ethan Petrie, of course, one of the best players in the country, a highly touted MLB draft prospect. But something that's been very encouraging, at least from my perspective, has been the pitching without Matthew Becker in the weekend rotation. Of course, I think he suffered a little bit of an injury before the season started, so they're trying to ramp him back up. In the midweek, he's been great there with 10 strikeouts already across 2 starts. But, for the rest of the pitching, with Ty Good from from College Charleston, Roman Kimball getting healthy, Dylan Eskew and Eli Jones, then the bullpen with Chris Veach and all them, it's been a great worksman-like mentality, I think, for that pitching staff.
Yeah, they've used so many arms so far throughout the year. They have 8 pitchers with over 5 innings pitched on the season, and kind of not having like a go-to ace. In this case, this is like a great way to, kind of remedy that. They don't have I would say one dominant arm, but a bunch of really solid guys that they can count on in multiple situations. I think it's, it's done them well so far. And because I know last year, they definitely had to ride the starters a lot, like Noah Hall and Will Sanders. They and Jack Mahoney, those guys pitched a lot of innings, but with what they're doing so far, it can be a lot more split up, and I think that's going to do them well throughout the year.
Absolutely, and the Gamecocks have had a bit of an easy stretch to start this season, taking on teams like Winthrop, Queens, Gardner-Webb, and Belmont, Miami of Ohio. But Spencer, rubber's meeting the road here this weekend, isn't it?
It sure is. They'll be tested by the Clemson Tigers in what's sure to be a fierce rivalry series this weekend. And last year's series did not disappoint at all. It was 3 really fun games. We get 3 more this year.
Absolutely. It's a little bit of a new wrinkle as, normally the neutral site action is up at Floor Field in Greenville, the home of the Greenville Drive. This year, it's in Columbia at Segra Park, home of the Columbia Fireflies. So really, it's kind of 2 home games for the Gamecocks, and then the road game at Doug Kingsmore there on Sunday at 2 p.m. But, this Clemson team, they came into the year a lot like South Carolina. They looked like they had one of the best lineups in the sport, and it was a question of their pitching. And so far, the pitching has been a little bit up and down, much like Matthew Becker. They're trying to get a guy back from injury and trying to work him out. Their starters for this weekend, Billy Barlow, Tristan Smith, and Aiden Knack, have had varying levels of success. Smith so far has been the best with a 3.12 ERA in 2 starts with 11 strikeouts to 4 walks. Austin Gordon is their pitcher who they're kind of working back over the course of the midweek. A season ago, South Carolina took 2 out of 3 from the Tigers. We'll be looking to do that again as they're going to try and chip away at the 186 to 145 and 2 record Clemson holds in this rivalry matchup. But the Tigers have one of the best lineups. Like I said, 11 different players have the home run. They've drawn 47 walks in 8 games. So it's going to be really, it wouldn't shock me at all if these games were like 10-9 or 8-7.
Yeah, it definitely has potential for high-scoring action, and I feel like when you talk about the Tigers' offense, you have to mention Cam Canarella, one of the guys on about every preseason, player of the year, positional watch list. The guy's just a lights-out hitter, and I think it's going to be a true test of the Gamecock rotation because, again, we've seen them against a lot of opponents that aren't quite at the caliber of Clemson or SEC baseball teams, as they'll start to see, coming up pretty soon. But I think this is going to be a good test, and also, we'll see how the lineup does against better pitching. It's just a step up in competition, but it's a rivalry match.
Absolutely, it's one of the best rivalries in all of college baseball. It's a very stacked weekend for college baseball as a whole, but really, this is the talk of the town in the sport, which is going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited. We'll see. Will Taylor, dual sport athlete at Clemson, hit 3 home runs in their midweek matchup against a very good USC Upstate team. But moving from the diamond to the hardwood, South Carolina women's basketball looks to close out their second straight perfect regular season against the Tennessee Lady Volunteers on Sunday. Tennessee, a once great program, they've struggled a little bit this season, and man, the Gamecocks, it's going to be like no holds barred there.
Yeah, this team does the opposite of struggle. They just seem to destroy every team in their path so far this season, taking down Arkansas by 37 last night in Fayetteville. They're 28-0 on the season. I think they took the preseason number 6 ranking personally, as they've been ranked number 1 since week 2. And since then, really, they've looked like the best team in the country, kind of without question. We've seen Ashton Watkins and Malaysia Fulwiley both had a big game last night. Watkins putting up 21 and 11 on 9 for 12 shooting. And JP, there's only so much we can say on this team. Every time we talk about them, it's like, well, I mean, we can only say so much. They're just that good until they start playing, some higher-ranked teams until we get to tournament play.
Yeah, because at this point, where Gamecock women's basketball is, all you're going to be judged on is how you perform in the tournament. Because that's the standard they've set, and it's a great standard. It speaks a lot to the program that Dawn Staley has built, the talent they're able to bring in. But at this point, November through February doesn't matter, and they
expect them to win.
This is the month where you're like, okay, like the picture, it's like the guy leaning back and then he leans forward with the controller. Mm-hmm. That's Gamecock women's basketball here in March, and it's going to be fun. The SEC is not particularly as strong this season as it has been in years past. We'll see if they can get a nice rematch against LSU and all them in the SEC tournament, which starts up the road in Greenville, South Carolina.
They'll get a little bit of rest first,
a week from
of course. Being as good as they are, they don't have to play for the first couple rounds, which is nice. And I know, rest is super crucial heading into, the big dance. Making sure all your players are well rested, healed up. I know Camila Cardoso is kind of being worked back into the lineup after playing in the Olympic qualifiers with Brazil. So definitely giving her a little more time to get back acclimated with the team, but also rest after, those set of games for her. That's going to be huge. And, just keeping the momentum going, I think, is the name of the game for this team.
Absolutely. And, for the first time in a while, we've had an equal amount of enjoyment and hope with the men's team as well as the women's. And now as we enter March, Gamecock men's basketball well on their way to their first tournament bid since 2017. Spencer, they have a couple more games left than the women, so.
They sure do. The women, the tournament starts next week. The men got a little more time, and they can close out the season strong with only 3 more games to go before March Madness. And as you mentioned, I think this has been such a welcome surprise, I would say, the Gamecock men's basketball team performing the way they have this season. I don't think anyone expected at least this level of success this early on into the Lamont Paris era.
No, I don't think so at all. And, they brought in a lot of transfers, guys like B.J. Mack, Miles Stute, and it was like a lot of guys that Lamont himself recruited over the years. Zachary Davis going coast to coast for a game winner in the final seconds in College Station, giving South Carolina their 6th SEC road victory of the season, tied for the most in the history of Gamecock men's basketball. And It's really kind of unfortunate timing with these games coming up. Saturday against number 24 Florida and Wednesday against number 4 Tennessee, that it's over spring break. So it might be a little bit of a lesson to atmosphere there. But a very encouraging sign, I think, for this team was Michie Johnson's performance against Texas A&M, against a good defensive team on the road in a very tough environment. He stepped up after struggling to score over the last couple weeks, and he dropped over 20 points and was a huge key to victory for South Carolina. And so they're going to need him. They're going to need B.J. Mack. They're going to need, Miles Studi to get healthy again after he missed the A&M game with an injury. The Gamecocks have a great opportunity, I think, to play their way to a higher seed with these remaining games.
They absolutely do. We talked about it last week. We'll say it again. All the remaining games are quad one win opportunities. It's Florida, it's Tennessee, and then they go on the road to Mississippi State. I mean, those are 3 really good teams, and you don't necessarily have to win out. I don't think a lot of people expect the Gamecocks to win out, as Tennessee's really finding their stride right now. But again, going 2-1 in this stretch, even 1-2, that would put you at 3-2 overall in the last 5 games in quad one opponents. That's huge for the tournament, and right now the Gamecocks are just helping their own case.
Yeah, 1-2, you probably stay pat at 6, depending on other people's results. 2-1, you're moving up to a 5 seed, potentially a top 15 national ranking. And man, if the Gamecocks win out going into the SEC tournament, they're going to be putting themselves into the conversation for a number 4 or number 3 seed, because the Gamecocks 1 game back in the SEC standings from a regular season SEC championship, something they have not done in men's basketball since 1997. So it's been a historically great year. Very excited, but across the country, it's been a historically great season. We're going to take a quick break, but be sure to stay tuned for national college basketball news right after this commercial. And speaking of spring break, we've got a slew of big games to cover before we head out for a week. Taking our bye week, of course, got to soak in the end of the college basketball season. The first being, personally, my favorite game of the entire season is going to be the Gonzaga Bulldogs taking on St. Mary's over in Moraga, California.
Thank God you pronounced that city name. I didn't want to take a stab at it. I'll let you take it. But hey, West Coast Conference basketball.
Special. We will be there no matter what.
Hey,
we will be seated.
We were yesterday watching Gonzaga San Francisco. I mean, we don't play about the West Coast.
No, we don't. And, Gonzaga, that game was really close. San Francisco had a nice lead at the end of the first half. Gonzaga ends on a run. Then they absolutely blow them out of the water in the second half, setting up what should be one of the best games of the season amongst the mid-major conferences, 2 top 25 teams. Gonzaga, like we talked about, their tournament hosts were in peril going into that Kentucky game. They beat the Wildcats in Lexington, and ever since, they haven't looked back. They've won 12 of 13, with that one loss being to to St. Mary's. They're at home in a controversial finish. But St. Mary's, man, they started out the year tough. They had a tough schedule, and ever since, a 16-game winning streak. They clinched the West Coast Conference regular season title outright last night with a dominant win over Pepperdine. And this is a team that has been one of the best mid-major conferences, performers of the entire 21st century.
Yeah, they're so consistent. You look at a March Madness bracket, chances are you see St. Mary's going back, as you mentioned, the rest of the 21st century, and they're a team people just hate to play. Their style of play is it's kind of obnoxious. I feel like if I was a basketball coach, this is a game you circle on your calendar because you have to approach the game so differently.
Yeah,
they slow the game down, and they make it matter every single possession.
And they're going to be physical and tough on defense, and that's why they've been, more so than any other team in the West Coast Conference, the team to be able to get under the skin of Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Because Gonzaga, in conference play, forever has been we're going to go in there, we're going to out-talent you, we're going to out-physical you. And they can't do that. They can out-talent the Gales. They can't go out there, they can't out-physical them. They can't out-tough them in the paint. This is a St. Mary's team that really is, one of the best iterations of this squad we've seen. A very fun team to watch. They're a consensus 6 seed, which would be the highest in program history, top 20 in all the fun little ratings we cover or follow. They're always great defensively, but they're better offensively this year than in the past. They are really good at controlling the offensive glass, and they move the ball around a lot. I think it's going to come down to, like what happened to Kentucky against Gonzaga. Gonzaga's ability to stretch the floor with their big men. And, you know, St. Mary's is up for the challenge for that. They switch really well. They're a very tall team. And it's just going to be a nice battle of styles. Gonzaga likes to go fast up and down the court, scoring a bunch of points. St. Mary's going to try and slow it down and man that.
Oh, they slow it down to the point where they're 358th in average possession length. So that's, you know, often it's not great when you're in a 300 anything kind of statistic, but this just shows that they like to really slow it down and, you know, play by their pace. And I think, you know, you make a great point. It's going to be a battle of, you know, what pace the game's played at, because both teams want to play at their own respective paces, and, you know, battle of styles, really.
Yeah, you know, Mitchell Saxon against Graham EK down low. That's going to be a lot of fun. Atmosphere is going to be crazy. But, I mean, this is just one of the biggest games of this weekend, Spencer.
It sure is. We're going to move back over to the SEC as Alabama and Tennessee battle for the top spot in the conference. And I can't wait for this game. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, Tennessee really finding their stride. Dalton Knecht he's threatening that National Player of the Year that, you know, I think we both thought Zach Edey maybe had on lock for a while, but he's putting it together. The Volunteers are 22-6 on the year, 12-3 in the SEC, tied for first with the Crimson Tide. I mean, this is going to be as we said, you know, a battle for first place. It's going to be so much fun. In Tuscaloosa, though, I think that's a really tough environment to play in. But, hey, Tennessee started 4-3. Since then, kind of caught fire.
Yeah, you know, same thing happened to Alabama. These are two teams that played very tough non-conference schedules. Tennessee's losses to start the year were to Purdue, North Carolina, and Kansas. Teams are lucky if they play one of those teams in the non-conference. Tennessee played them and then some. You know, and Alabama was the same way. They started 6-5. They lost to teams like Ohio State, Clemson, I think North Carolina as well, another tough non-conference. And meanwhile, as the Gamecocks lurk a game back in the SEC standings, these two are duking it out. And like we said, much like Gonzaga, St. Mary's, this is a conflict of styles. Alabama has the best adjusted offensive efficiency in the history of the KenPom ratings. They're great at shooting the ball from, you know, inside the free throw line and beyond the arc. But Tennessee, under that Rick Barnes defense, is electric at shutting down teams. They shut down the Crimson Tide in Knoxville, winning 91-71. And then they beat up on Auburn this past week with Dalton Knecht outscoring the Tigers 25-21 by himself down the stretch. And so I'm just very excited for this one. Of course, you know, you got guys like Mark Sears, 20.6 points per game, 9th in the KenPom Player of the Year ratings.
I think he's one of the most underrated guards in the country. A guy that just doesn't get enough love for what he does for this Crimson Tide team. And his ability to shoot from the three-point line is, you know, one of the best in the nation. Shoots almost 45% from three on high, you know, a lot of attempts. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, you know, and when they first met in Knoxville, Mark Sears, he kind of got his, but no one else in Alabama was able to chip in beyond him. And I think that's the big key for this one. They're going to have their home crowd behind them. They're going to have to get into the Tennessee defense early. And, you know, it's a Rick Barnes team in March. So, you know, but going
it gets a little scary for Rick Barnes in March.
Absolutely.
The lights are a little bright.
But hey, going up to Mississippi here a little bit, Purdue and Illinois this Tuesday are continuing one of the Big Ten's best rivalries in hoops, and yet another conference matchup between two of the best teams in a great conference out there in the Big Ten. And, you know, National Player of the Year, reigning Zach Edey, going up against a really balanced and talented Illinois squad.
Yeah, Illinois is a team that, you know, they've had kind of their struggles, especially away from home, only 4-5 outside of Illinois on the year. But again, this team, look at their balanced scoring attack. I mean, Terrence Shannon Jr., of course, leads the Fighting Illini, almost 22 a game on almost 50% shooting. 47.7 is not too shabby at all. And you know, he's a three-level scorer for sure. He can get it done behind the line, in the mid-range, and up close. And it's a really balanced attack, as you mentioned. And Purdue, the name of the game against Purdue is how do you deal with Zach Edey? And
force other people to beat him, or to beat you.
And that's exactly kind of the Achilles heel, I would say, of Purdue is if you manage, you know, it is a big if. It's like a 7'4" if you can manage to stop Zach Edey. It's will the rest of their team, is it enough to beat you? So I think that's got to be the game plan for the Fighting Illini.
Yeah, and you know, They get it at home. I think that's obviously a huge key. It's one of the best environments in the Big Ten. Purdue, they're accustomed to going on the road, but of course, we've seen them lose to Northwestern and Nebraska in road games, so they're not immortal there. Like you said, they're going to key in on Zach Edey, and it's going to be up to Purdue to kind of swing the rock around, try and get good looks for Braden Smith and Lance Jones, who are very skilled three-point shooters. Lance Jones with over 280 attempts from beyond the arc on the season. And so, two very good teams, two very well-coached teams, Brad Underwood's squad. It's just a lot of fun, I think. We get these kinds of matchups. Of course, the Big Ten regular season title is already squared away for Purdue, I think, at least clinching a share of it. But, it's the best time of the year,
It really is, and we've got so many great matchups to cover, not only in the men's game. In women's basketball, hoops phenom Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes play the second-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. And JP, this is probably my favorite matchup of the week. These two teams are both incredible, and we saw, this is the best Ohio State women's basketball team maybe ever.
Yeah,
and they're ranked second. Of course, it's a really good team, but against Iowa and probably the greatest women's college basketball player ever in Caitlin Clark. She's only 17 points away from breaking Pete Maravich's all-time scoring record in the NCAA, of course, not men's or women's, just the overall scoring record. She's already clinched the women's scoring record, averaging over 30 a game and almost 10 assists. You can't say enough about how dominant she's been in the women's basketball game.
Well, you know what you can say enough about? The rest of her team. Let's be a little serious. This is not the Iowa team from a year ago that defeated the Gamecocks in the Final Four. Caitlin Clark is outstanding. Let's be serious there a little bit. But outside of her, that's why Ohio State was able to beat them in Columbus. This is going to be an outstanding game, and it makes me very happy that the women's game is getting these kinds of matchups, this kind of hype. It's a 1 p.m. Fox tip-off on Sunday. It's going to be an absolutely amazing atmosphere out there in Iowa City, and it's a nice stylized thing because Ohio State's going to get scoring from all around their lineup, and Caitlin Clark is the only player for the Iowa Hawkeyes.
This is actually not true. They can field the lineup. Crazy, believe it or not.
Caitlin usage rate Clark, it's going to be interesting to see, I think, how Ohio State will attack her again. And, thankfully, there won't be anyone for her to run into on the court afterwards and flail around like a spiraling helicopter. Yeah, because, if Skylar Diggins was playing in this era of women's basketball, she would have so much more hype than her. Lil Wayne went to South Bend one time to see Skylar Diggins play. Talk to me when Caitlin Clark does that. Anyway, welcome back to Bubble Watch, where we highlight a few of the teams still fighting for spots in the men's NCAA tournament. We've got a nice batch of teams for you this week as we're going to head into conference tournaments by the time we come back. First up from the ACC, it's the Pitt Panthers. And Spencer, this is a team that made the tourney last year, went on a little bit of a run, and they have some great victories.
They sure do, and you can see the picture right there. Big wins at Duke. That is one of the biggest wins you can get in college basketball year in and year out. Of course, the Blue Devils are always good, and, Pitt really just kind of brawling for a bubble spot. And the bad losses, JP, one of them is particularly bad, as Mizzou is an atrocity this year.
Yeah, and Syracuse is it's not really a bad loss, but it's the way they did. They got blown out at home by a team that the metrics aren't a big fan of, but the Orange are 19-10. They could find themselves on the bubble if they keep it up. And what's really going to hold them...
If we had a show next week, we could have bubble watched the Great Orange, but...
I think what could really hold them back, unless they win out, is that just paltry ranked non-conference strength of schedule.
Yeah, 337th is pretty bad, but this team does have a lot of opportunities, I would say, to win out. You're at Boston College on Saturday, and then 2 home games against Florida State and NC State. Very winnable games for the Panthers.
Yeah, Florida State's not great. NC State's kind of sputtering out to end the year. It's been a tough end. Hearing rumblings out there in Raleigh about the future for Kevin Keats.
Oof.
So we'll see what happens there.
Hearing rumblings.
But, Pitt, they have a great opportunity. Blake Hinson's one of the best players in the country. He can single-handedly will his team to victory. And, he's a player who's made for March. And so, I think that they need to win out. And they need to have a nice performance in the ACC tournament, I think, to feel totally safe in the field.
Absolutely. Moving on to our next team out on the west side of the country, the Utah Utes might just need to win out to keep their postseason hopes alive. And, JP, this is a team that, backs against the wall. They've got to win out, I think. And it's home against Cal and then two big road games against Oregon State and Oregon. But those are good opportunities for pretty solid wins.
Yeah, they have some good wins. They beat Wake Forest back in November. They went on the road to St. Mary's, which is a very, you don't see that very often, a high major team traveling to play a mid-major on the road. They also have a win over number 21 Washington State, who is, one of the best teams in the Pac-12, one of the hottest teams in the country. Things I think could hold this team back, getting swept by Arizona State, struggling against Stanford and Cal on the road too, being below 500 in conference play. That is a pretty atrocious mark, and it's really unfortunate because this is a team that could have been fighting for a very high seed if they had kept it up in conference play. Their ratings are good. They are a good shooting team. They're a very solid defensive team, and Cal and Oregon State, those are teams you need to have a little bit of metric fluff in those wins. You got to win by 20 or more. Not 20 or more, but 15 to 20 points. And then on the road against Oregon is a great opportunity for a quad one win to close the season. But like you said,
the tournament play is also going to be crucial for this team. Got to see them at least take a couple games, I'd say, for the committee to start looking at the Utes a little more seriously.
You got to win out. You got to look nice against Cal and Oregon State. When you get to the Pac-12 tourney, you're going to need to win against fellow bubble teams like Oregon again, possibly, or Colorado, and then win against a Washington State or Arizona. They're there on the bubble, but it's the conference performance that's really holding them back because they have a great strength of schedule. It's just when rubber has met the road, they've kind of faltered a little bit. They're one of those teams that's great at home, but can't really do it on the road. But, a team that has more than risen to the occasion in conference play, coming on back here to the Blue Ridge Mountains in the Carolinas, the App State Mountaineers are the last team we're going to cover here on Bubble Watch. And, App State, man, what a team they've had. First place in the Sun Belt. They have some outstanding victories. And their season ends today against Arkansas State, so a chance for a statement there before they go into the Sun Belt tournament next week.
Yeah, first off, shout out my sister, Roll Nears. One of the best home atmospheres, I would say, in the country. It's super underrated. They pack that place out. App State fans, they get crazy in football, and they've transferred it over to the court this year, and I don't think a lot of people expected this team to be this good.
No, absolutely. They came into the year, they had a good year last year, and it was like, well, they'll be solid in a Sun Belt that's pretty talented, and there's a lot of good mid-major teams, especially with James Madison in there, and, they start the year off nice, and then, they did suffer a few losses early on to Northern Illinois and Oregon State. Then they went on a run. They got Auburn at home, got the big win there.
Huge win. This is, of course, them storming the court afterwards. But, that's a massive win. And, of course, the committee's going to be looking at this. But I would say a good performance in the Sun Belt tournament. And if they win their final game today, I think the Nears have an okay shot to make it.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a possibility of an at-large bid for them or James Madison. We've talked about them a little bit. James Madison did get swept by the Mountaineers, but they have a big road win against Michigan State, and they're right behind them in the Sun Belt Conference standings. And I think the key for App State to getting an at-large bid would be, of course, like you said, win today, get to the Sun Belt final, and I think you feel good about yourself, especially with how nice that Auburn win has aged. And at some point, you can't argue against wins with how many wins App State would have at that point. They'd have
26 and then a couple in the tourney. That's getting close to the 30 bomb.
Yeah, and it's pretty much unheard of, a team with 30 wins getting left out. But this team has been an absolute joy to watch. Dorman product Miles Tate transferred from Butler to the Nears and has been one of their best players, averaging over 6 assists per game. And they're a team that's really kind of led by their big man, which is fun to watch. And I'm just excited to see these teams in action.
We love sports. That's why this show was made, crazy take. But that's all we've got for you today. We'll be right back after the break with this week's Pick'ems to wrap up this episode of Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome back to BDL Pick'ems. At the start of Week 4, Spencer has 26 wins and 14 losses, and I am 21 and 19. Spencer, it's an awesome week coming up in college basketball, and starting out with the women's side of things, number 6 Iowa against number 2 Ohio State. Take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to take Iowa in this one. It's Caitlin Clark's last college game at home. That place is going to be sold out. They sell out places on the road to see her play. And, again, she can break the all-time scoring record, final home game, chance to take down the Big Ten regular season champs. I think the Hawkeyes rise to the occasion. What do you think?
I think the Buckeyes are going to go on the road and get a big win against Madam usage rates. I think Ohio State is one of the best teams in women's college basketball, and teams win over individuals. Give me Ohio State. And now moving to the ACC, we've got number 17 Notre Dame taking on number 22 Louisville. Notre Dame got a big win last night against number 5 Virginia Tech. Spencer, your thoughts?
Yeah, of course I picked the Hokies to win that one, so I'll take the Fighting Irish. They proved me wrong. I said, hey, I'll bet on you next time. But again, Hannah Hidalgo, one of the best players in the country, and she's a freshman, so I'm going to ride the hot hand. You?
Yeah, the Irish are very good at home. This is a nice rivalry matchup here to end the regular season, and I think Notre Dame's going to get it done in what should be a big win towards them hosting in the first round of the tournament. Now moving on to number 14 Indiana, going up against a Maryland team that's been kind of disappointing this year.
Yeah, since losing Diamond Miller last year to the WNBA draft, Maryland hasn't really looked the same, but I mean, they're a pretty consistent program. I do think they'll bounce back, but I don't think it'll be against Indiana. I think the Hoosiers get it done. You?
I agree. The Hoosiers, they're a great team. They're on a nice tear here to end the regular season. I think they're going to keep it up. And then ending out our women's coverage, got a great rivalry game as Virginia's going to host number 5 Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I think Virginia Tech gets it done. Even though it's a big rivalry game, Virginia Tech is still one of the best teams in the country. I think they get it done. What do you think?
Yeah, they hadn't lost since January before last night's trip to South Bend. Now they're going back on the road to Charlottesville against a team fighting for an NCAA tournament spot. But I think Virginia Tech's going to be able to respond. I think people forget this is a team that was in the Final Four a season ago. Sure, I think they're going to get a big win.
Yep, and moving on to the men's side of the ball. Jeez, I just fumbled that big time. We're moving to Big East basketball. Creighton versus Marquette. JP, who you got?
Man, I mean, both these teams have just been on absolute heaters. Tyler Kolek and the Golden Eagles going up against Baylor Shiremen and the Creighton Blue Jays. But Creighton has, they beat UConn a week ago, and I think they're going to keep it up, man. They're going to get a nice big home win against the number 5 team in the country.
I think the Golden Eagles get it done on the road. I'm a big believer in them. They're one of my favorite teams headed into March, and I think Shaka Smart he's just that guy, frankly. Moving on to SEC action, it's number 14 Alabama versus number 4 Tennessee. JP?
I'm a big fan of the Vols, and Alabama's just absolute refusal to participate on the defensive end of the floor is just quite honestly one of the more disgusting things I've ever seen. They're a very hypothetical team, and for that, I'm taking the team that's actually won big games on actual basketball courts, not on spreadsheets. Give me Dalton Connect and the Volunteers.
Yeah, playing both offense and defense is probably a more successful way to win. I'm also going to take the Vols for that reason. Moving on out to the West Coast Conference, it's St. Mary's Gonzaga. JP?
Man, I'm so excited for this game. These are two of my favorite teams in the country. They're going to go head-to-head. It's going to be a raucous environment. I think this one goes down to the wire, but give me St. Mary's with some clutch defense late to hold on to a just titanic win. I'm
also going to ride with the Gales. Gonzaga has been super impressive recently, but I think it's just too tough of a task, but I do agree it's going to be a super close game. And our final matchup of the day, this one close to JP's heart. I thought he'd bring out the Seton Hall Sox again. It's number 3 UConn versus Seton Hall. JP?
Man, this has been an interesting year for the Pirates. Picked 9th in the Big East to enter the season. They started out bad, losing to teams like Iowa, Southern Cal, and Rutgers. But man, once that calendar flipped to the Big East schedule, Shaheen Holloway had them boys right. And it all started with a 15-point victory over the UConn Huskies there at the Rock up in Newark, New Jersey. And now, Seton Hall, they struggled on the road against Creighton earlier this week. They're dealing with some injuries and illnesses. But Shaheen Holloway, when his team's been backs against the wall, the Pirates are fighting for an NCAA tournament spot. They've been able to rise to the occasion and really kind of meet the level of their opponent. And Danny Hurley's Huskies have been victim to that more than enough times since they rejoined the Big East. I think Kadary Richmond kind of cements himself as a potential Big East Player of the Year with a big performance. I think Seton Hall is going to stamp their bid to the tournament with a victory on the road against the UConn Huskies.
I really love Seton Hall. I love Shaheen Holloway, and I love what he's doing up there. But I love UConn a little bit more. I think they're still one of the best teams in the country. And just because they, lost on the road to Creighton, they got kind of bumped down a couple spots. I still think they're the best team in the country, honestly. Yeah. Dan Hurley he's a menace. Like, he scares me, and that's probably means you're a pretty good coach, and I think he is. The Huskies get it done in my book. That's going to do it for this episode of Ball Don't Lie. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and Facebook at SGTV at USC.
To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv@usc.com. For SGTV, I'm JP Barry.
And I'm Spencer Ball. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great weekend, Carolina.
Forever to thee.